Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and a very warm welcome to the opening night of the Bloomberg Business Summit and the 47th ASEAN Summit. Now, the last 2 days have put Malaysia and ASEAN on the global stage. It's been a hectic 48 hours, I'm sure you'll agree. And we've seen Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim flex his diplomatic muscle. He's brought President Donald Trump for a visit along with leaders from all the continents. And in 48 hours, Malaysia has signed a trade deal with the US. The US and China have a trade framework on which both leaders can work on. Cambodia and Thailand have a peace arrangement. You would agree that very few leaders out there would be able to do this, and Anwar Ibrahim is among them. For making this summit possible, I'd like to thank our founding sponsor, the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, and thanks to our presenting sponsor, CIMB.
Advancing customers and society. Please welcome to the stage Novan Amirudin, Group CEO, CIMB.
The Most Honorable Prime Minister of Malaysia, Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, the Honorable Minister of International Trade and Industry, Tengku Datuk Sri Zafrul Aziz, the Honorable Deputy Minister of International Trade and Industry, Liu Chin Tong, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ASEAN Business Summit. The Most Honorable Prime Minister, we are most grateful for your time tonight, despite your hectic schedule. You have been instrumental in steering ASEAN's agenda this year, bringing our region, and in fact large global economies closer, driving new growth opportunities, and showing that unity remains our greatest strength in these uncertain times. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot has been said about ASEAN's strengths. ASEAN is on track to become the world's 4th largest economy by 2030. ASEAN is young, dynamic, and digitally connected. ASEAN is one of the fastest growing consumer markets anywhere. Yet, ASEAN is also often misunderstood. Some say our progress is uneven. Some say we move too slowly. Some say our diversity holds us back. But what makes ASEAN special is exactly that. ASEAN was never meant to be perfect or uniform. Our uniqueness lies in our diversity of languages, culture, economies, and even politics. For nearly 6 decades, we have not only endured, but advanced. We turn our diversity into strength through strong partnerships, pragmatism, and resilience. And in many ways, CIMB is built on that same foundation. We are an ASEAN bank with presence across 10 countries, diverse in people and perspectives, but united in purpose. CIMB's purpose is clear: to advance customers and society. This purpose drives everything we do. How then does CIMB advance ASEAN? CIMB advances our 30 million regional customers across every segment of society. CIMB advances growth, mobilizing over $100 billion in loans to support businesses, power trade, and fuel cross-border investments. CIMB advances Islamic finance. Half of our Malaysian bank is Sharia compliant, and we are now the second largest Islamic bank in Indonesia, the world's most populous Muslim nation. CIMB advances digital. Today, two out of 3 Malaysians use our Touch 'n Go digital as their everyday wallet. In the Philippines, 1 in 10 Filipinos bank with our digital bank. But growth means little if it is not shared. CIMB advances the SMEs and B40s through our digital and fintech solutions. CIMB advances society. We invest in education, sports, the arts, and in environmental causes. We've committed $50 million until 2030. And most importantly, CIMB advances talent. The CIMB ASEAN Scholarship is now in its 10th year, nurturing 130 future leaders from across the region. These examples of progress, inclusion, and partnership capture the very spirit of ASEAN. They show that CIMB is committed to make sure everybody wins, because we strongly believe when we lift others, we all rise together. Ladies and gentlemen, as we look ahead, let us recognize this truth. ASEAN is not just part of the global growth story. ASEAN is the growth story. And CIMB will continue to play our part to connect markets, empower communities, and drive progress across our region. Ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to partnering you to meet your banking needs. Thank you, and I wish you all a wonderful evening.
In the heart of Southeast Asia, a nation rises with purpose. Malaysia, your strategic gateway, globally connected, built for scale, and powered by world-class talent. This is where ideas ignite and sustainability meets strategy. Malaysia, your strategic hub in Southeast Asia, where tomorrow is already in motion.
Please welcome to the stage Tengku Zafrul Aziz, Malaysia's Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry.
Honorable Prime Minister, Trade Minister, Mr. Sidhu, I'm going to keep this very short and make sure I left my script, my speech there. Just like to say thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, for making it to this event. It's been a very tiring day. The Prime Minister started at 7:30 a.m. and he has another event after this. So just a few things, just 3 things if I can share with all of you here today. Firstly, for ASEAN, it's a very important, momentous occasion, especially for the economic ministers, the trade ministers. We signed an upgrade of the ASEAN Trade and Goods Agreement today. And tomorrow, we'll be signing an upgrade of the ASEAN-China FTA. And tomorrow we will also have, for the first time since the signing of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, RCEP, the leaders meeting since the year 2020. So there are many things that are happening, but what's important is that these things are happening when people are questioning the economic model. People are questioning whether multilateralism still works. And here in ASEAN, we are together and we continue to believe in a rule-based trading system with WTO at its core. Of course, the Prime Minister thinks WTO still needs reform, but at the same time, we are here together. We show that we are driven by the principle of centrality and the principle of neutrality. And at the same time, the second point I'd like to share with you is that today, sir, we have the business groups, there are many business summits, and the Prime Minister chose only one, and he attends the Bloomberg. So thank you, Bloomberg, for making it. And my final point, I have to talk a bit about Malaysia. So Malaysia, as everyone here knows, we are the #1 country in terms of investments. I have to say this, please. And partly because of what we have achieved is we have the right ecosystem, the stability, and the early growth GDP forecast shown that we're going to achieve 5.2% in the third quarter. And if you look at where we are today, look at all the economic parameters, inflation, unemployment, interest rate, etc., we are moving in the right direction. And this year, for the first 6 months, we recorded investment up 18%, trade is up 5%, and GDP, we're probably going to surpass the forecast of 4 to 4.8%. So to me, the Prime Minister is our best salesman, so I'm going to let him speak now, and I hope that all of us in this room will continue to believe in ASEAN and continue to believe in Malaysia. So thank you.
Thank you, Minister Zafrul. And now it is my privilege to invite the Honorable Prime Minister of Malaysia and Chair of ASEAN 2025 to deliver his address. Prime Minister, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Terima kasih. Thank you again to Tengku Zafrul, Sidu and the Deputy Minister, of course Bloomberg, and CIMB, of course. Thank you. CIMB have little choice when Zafrul is involved. But thank you very much. As mentioned by Zafrul, it's been a long day, but it's worth the effort. We had, I should say, excellent or fruitful meeting with President Donald Trump. We got him to dance initially so that things cool off a bit better. I was fully briefed, and the exchanges have been useful. I mean, the ride with him in the car allowed me to raise some very, very pertinent questions close to our heart on multilateralism, on the need to maintain centrality of ASEAN, particularly Malaysia, to engage with the West and the East, to go strong, formidable relations in terms of investment and trade with the United States of America. At the same time, forge a very strong new alliance with China. Oh, mind you, don't envy me on this. But at least I could share with him, frankly, some of these issues. And then to explain to him why the issue, for example, Gaza is very painful and affecting, with ramifications throughout the world, and particularly more so in this region. And also gave him the opportunity to articulate his vision, his views. But finally, during the bilateral meeting between Malaysia and President Donald Trump, went very well. We had, I think, Zafrul mentioned this today, that we managed to resolve most of the issues. We told him that, very difficult for an independent country like Malaysia, with, of course, much weaker opposition, they have one-third in parliament, but still very vociferous, very strong in their views, to be seen to be submitting, compliant to other powers. So I have assured him that our fundamental focus is, of course, trade and investments. And I mentioned the Bloomberg Business Summit. Yeah, and he said, why? I said, I don't know, you ask Bloomberg. And then, of course, we had the US Asean Summit, where extraordinary patience on the part of President Trump. Most of his advisors were a bit surprised because I took over the chair and we followed the rules. Opening remarks by the chair and the opening remarks by the president, and followed by all the leaders, no interruption, and then the response. You didn't see this in Sharm el-Sheikh, but it happened here. So I think ASEAN as a cohesive, formidable group did impress him. The things that we do share in common, there was consensus built on the need to maintain our centrality, to continue to engage with the United States and China and the rest. And for Malaysia, this is more pertinent. And I took, of course, the opportunity to explain Malaysia's position. The statistics, economic figures, of course, Zafrul has referred to, alluded to briefly. But I think for Malaysia, it's one of the most politically stable countries, certainly so in the region. And I don't know what you call, if 2/3 majority in parliament should be stable. In fact, when I was in the opposition, I would never believe that why should the government have 2/3 majority. But that was when I was in the opposition. Now I realize if you're stable and there's clarity in terms of policies, a clear direction. You talk about semiconductor strategy, you talk about new industrial master plan, you talk about energy transition or digital transformation, there's clarity of these policies. Once there's clarity, it's easy for policymakers, easy for the investors, both domestic and foreign investors. But we have to steer and be focused. And our initial challenge took over as Prime Minister, the effectiveness, the effective execution of policies. Because people are not familiar with the style. There is whether we need to have commissions. For the elites, we call it commissions. For the poorer segment, we call it corruption. So this with the corruption, the commission, to me is damn bloody same thing. But still, we need to correct these misperceptions and to ensure that we focus also on governance. Most economists, most elites want to talk about economic fundamentals. But to me, without good governance, economic fundamentals don't work because you do not serve the country and the community. So that has been our challenge in the last few years. And we have seen the results initially, both in terms of growth, in terms of even equity, the principles of equity. I'm very passionate about these views because I cannot rationalize. I mean, I think morally unacceptable for any government and political elite to accept gross inequities, grinding poverty in the midst of plenty. So there must be clear policy. Even then, we do shift from the conventional, traditional notion of a new economic policy where we place too much importance to racial composition to a policy based on needs. Yes, affirmative action, but based on needs. Poverty means poverty. The need to, for social mobility means to deal with those who need the necessary support. So these policies are made clear, and since Zafrul didn't use the text, I'm not going to refer to the text. You know, we can't have the minister outshining the prime minister. So, so these are important issues to my mind. Tomorrow I'll have breakfast with Premier Lee Chiang. Yeah. Can you imagine? I was, in the private conversation with President Donald Trump, and tomorrow morning, very private breakfast with Premier Lee Chiang. I mean, that explains that Malaysia is a trading nation. Yes, we have differences, but we cannot be compelled or dictated to insist to follow any particular interest, except to represent our interests and to focus on economic fundamentals, which means business and investments. And I think that mean well. I mean, Zafrul referred to the fact that I am continuing with one meeting, Mark Carney of Canada, Ramaphosa of South Africa, Antonio Costa of EU, and Lula da Silva of Brazil. Because these are regional heads, I happen to be just a coordinator here, and we will, need to focus on, if you talk about economic fundamentals, and as a trading nation, we need to explore new horizons, new markets. Traditionally, largest trade investments is with the United States. To me, it's no issue. We'll continue to do that. But at the same time, we have seen phenomenal increase of trade and investments with China. But we thought with Canada, with South Africa, with the African continent, with Latin America, there's huge enormous potential. Even within ASEAN, once we admit that this is relatively one of the freest region in the world, or a peaceful region in the world, it is the fastest growing economy in the world. What we lack within ASEAN is intra-ASEAN trade and investments. And we're now pushing that agenda ahead. ASEAN power grid, for example. Digitalization and connectivity in the region. Other than issues of food security, maritime security, and etc. Even maritime security, can you imagine? We made a deal with the United States to try and enhance our capabilities in terms of maritime. At the same time, tomorrow we'll get China to be equally involved. We are involved with India to protect the maritime stability of the Indian Ocean. It's no issue. People do talk about South China Sea, etc., etc. But I think for an emerging economy, for a trading nation, in the region which is peaceful, it is our task to ensure that this region remains peaceful. We talk about the Cambodia-Thailand border crisis. Well, it's small compared to some other major upheavals, but to us it's huge. The moment there was a conflict, some shooting, then immediately all my colleagues then say, look, Anwar, let's do something. We contacted them and persuaded them come to Kuala Lumpur. And of course, President Trump also did make calls to them. And that's why we signed the accord witnessed by President Trump and Anwar Sofair. But what I want to suggest to you is that because this region is considered to be the most peaceful in the region in the world, even small skirmishes is big to us. And to me, it augurs very well for the future of this region. Similarly, this problem in Myanmar, it is still problematic. We have this formulated this 5-point consensus, some of the broad parameters that all ASEAN countries have agreed to. But still, we continue to engage. I met the military junta chief twice, once in Bangkok and once in Beijing, and to tell him that no arguments, ceasefire is a must. Otherwise, no point talking. And that was a precondition for us to support them in terms of humanitarian assistance, particularly after the earthquake, devastating earthquake, and setting up the military hospital or the field hospital. And they agreed with the terms. Yes, there are skirmishes, but certainly much smaller as compared to what happened in the last few years. We have 200,000 refugees from Myanmar or Rohingyas here. But in the last 1 year, we don't encounter such problems. And the other condition we imposed was that you must allow for complete, total access of humanitarian assistance, irrespective of their differences or political differences or groups. And they did agree. And our military hospital did not face or encounter problems in getting patients from all groups. And to my mind, is a major change. I mean, it's not satisfactory, of course. We talk about human rights, but still, to me, is a gradual progress that we have seen, and I'm quite confident that we continue to engage, it may help to resolve. But I know this is a business conference, but the business summit can only be effective when country is peaceful, politically stable, and we have crafted economic policies that's attractive for investments, both domestic and foreign, and conducive environment for business. That I can assure you, because I waited quite some time to become the Prime Minister, and had to study hard in prison for more than 10.5 years. And so, books published before 2015, most of the important works I have read. No, recent one maybe less, because I didn't have that much time anymore. Because every time people buy me books, Chintong is keen to give me a book, I said, you have given me 10 years ago when I was there inside. I have all the time in the world. So anyway, thank you very much, and apologize for coming a bit late, but and having to leave. So Bloomberg, you owe me one dinner, because I'm not having dinner to you tonight too. But certainly I look forward to. Thank you, Linda. I mean, you have a good Bloomberg agent here, and thank you very much. I mean, you have been very supportive. We need your support. We need your confidence. And I tell you one thing. What I have learned all these years during the trials and tribulations and hardship that I had to endure with myself, my wife, my children, my friends. What have I learned? Human dignity, integrity, and do whatever it takes to make sure that Malaysia become a very successful economy, that you can be able to serve your people, irrespective of race or creed or regions. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, thank you so much for joining us. I assure you this was the right dinner to attend. Ladies and gentlemen, do continue to network. If not, join us again tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. right here. And of course, we'd like to thank our sponsors for making tonight possible. Thank you so much. Good evening.